It's hard to imagine what life was like a million years ago. Back then, our ape-like ancestors were just beginning to walk upright and make primitive tools. But somehow, they managed to survive. And somehow, we made it all the way to today. Join us in this episode of Life Hacks as we look back a million years to see how the first humans survived. First, let's set the stage. A million years ago, most of the world was covered in thick, dark forest. There wasn't much in the way of open grasslands or desert. This meant that food was plentiful and easy to find. In fact, there was so much food available that our ancestors probably didn't have to travel very far to find something to eat. They could simply walk out their front door and forage for berries, nuts, and fruit in the trees outside their hut or camp. The same went for meat. While early humans were mostly vegetarian, they did occasionally hunt small animals like rabbits and deer. And because these animals were so plentiful, our ancestors didn't have to go very far to find them. Early humans also had plenty of water to drink. After all, there weren't any deserts to speak of. And the forests were filled with babbling brooks and rivers. In fact, there was so much water around that early humans probably didn't have to walk very far to find some. They could probably just head down the nearest hill and find a stream or spring. And if that didn't work, they could always head up a tree and collect rainwater. So now that we've established that food and water were plentiful, let's talk about shelter. Early humans didn't have the luxury of modern conveniences like wood or brick, but they did have one very important resource: trees. Trees provided early humans with everything they needed to build a sturdy shelter, including wood for support beams, leaves for roofing, and branches for everything in between. All told, an early human shelter might not have been very different from a modern-day treehouse. Of course, this type of shelter wasn't exactly energy efficient. In the winter months, early humans would have to rely on fires to keep warm. But thankfully, wood was plentiful, so starting a fire wasn't too difficult. Plus, early humans probably wore thick, warm clothing made from animal skins, so they didn't have to worry about getting too cold. Of course, living in a treehouse probably didn't come without its drawbacks. For one thing, early humans would have been very vulnerable to attack by predators like wolves and tigers. Luckily, our ancestors were smart enough to make tools. So even if they were outnumbered, they could still defend themselves. In fact, some experts believe that the development of tools is what allowed early humans to survive and eventually take over the world. After all, what's the most valuable resource in the world? It's definitely not food, water, or shelter, but knowledge. Tools allowed early humans to do things they couldn't do before, like kill bigger animals for food, defend themselves against predators, and explore new environments. This newfound versatility is what allowed early humans to spread out across the globe and eventually become the dominant species on Earth. Let's take a step back from tools for a second and think about the other things that early humans had going for them. For one thing, they were incredibly strong and agile. After all, they were living in a world full of predators, where every day was a fight for survival. Only the strongest and most agile humans could hope to survive. This meant that early humans were physically fit, which gave them an edge over other animals. Additionally, early humans were highly intelligent, which allowed them to develop the cognitive ability necessary to plan ahead and solve problems. This intelligence is what allowed them to make tools and weapons, start fires, and ultimately take over the world. Another thing that helped early humans survive was their social structure. Early humans lived in groups which provided them with the necessary manpower to hunt large animals and defend themselves against predators. Groups also allowed humans to share knowledge and resources, which made their lives easier. In fact, some experts believe that the development of language was a key factor in the survival and eventual dominance of early humans. Language allowed humans to communicate complex ideas and coordinate their activities, which made hunting, gathering, and defending against predators much easier. There's no doubt that early humans had a lot going for them. They were strong, intelligent, and social. They had the ability to make tools, control fire, and communicate complex ideas. But despite all of these advantages, they still faced stiff competition from other animals. Some of the predators that early humans had to contend with were incredibly dangerous. Wolves, tigers, and bears, oh my. These predators were not only strong and agile, but they also had sharp teeth and claws that they weren't afraid to use. To make matters worse, many of these predators lived in packs, which meant that early humans were often outnumbered. Despite these challenges, early humans managed to survive and eventually thrive. They developed sophisticated hunting techniques that allowed them to take down even the largest animals. They also learned how to make better tools and weapons that gave them an edge in fights with predators. Ultimately, early humans' combination of strength, intelligence, and social skills allowed them to overcome the odds and survive. Now that we've talked about the physical challenges that early humans faced, let's turn our attention to the mental ones. Early humans had to be incredibly resourceful in order to survive. They had to be able to find food and water, build shelter, and defend themselves against predators. But perhaps most importantly, they had to be able to adapt to change. After all, the world was constantly changing. The seasons would change from hot and sunny to cold and rainy. Animals would migrate, and new predators would move into the area. In order to survive, early humans had to be able to adapt to these changes. They had to be willing to learn new ways of finding food, building shelter, and defending themselves. This adaptability is ultimately what allowed early humans to survive and eventually thrive. They were able to learn from their experiences and adjust their behavior accordingly. Perhaps the greatest challenge that early humans faced was disease. Disease can be caused by a variety of factors, including bacteria, viruses, and parasites. These disease-causing organisms can be transmitted in a variety of ways, including through the air, through contact with contaminated surfaces, or through the consumption of contaminated food or water. One of the most common diseases that afflict early humans was tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a bacterial infection that typically affects the lungs. Symptoms of the disease include a cough, fever, and weight loss. In the past, tuberculosis was often fatal, but today, it can be treated with antibiotics. Another common disease among early humans was malaria. Malaria is a parasitic infection that is transmitted through the bite of an infected mosquito. Symptoms of the disease include a fever, chills, and flu-like symptoms. In the past, malaria was also often fatal, but today it can be prevented with mosquito nets and treated with anti-malarial medication. Early humans also had to deal with parasitic infections. Parasites are organisms that live in or on another organism, the host, and cause it harm. One common parasite that affects humans is the tapeworm. Tapeworms live in the intestines of their hosts and rob them of essential nutrients. Another common parasite is the hookworm. Hookworms live in the soil and penetrate human skin. They then travel to the intestines where they lay eggs. Their eggs are then passed on to the environment, and the cycle begins again. Early humans probably picked up these parasites through contact with contaminated soil or water. While parasites are generally more of a nuisance than a deadly threat, they can cause serious health problems if left untreated. Despite the challenges posed by disease, early humans were able to survive. They developed ways to prevent the spread of disease, such as by avoiding contact with sick individuals and by boiling water. They also developed treatments for common ailments, such as herbal remedies for coughs and fevers. These measures allowed early humans to stay healthy and survive in a constantly changing world. In conclusion, life a million years ago was challenging, to say the least. Early humans had to contend with a number of physical and mental challenges, including predators, harsh weather conditions, and disease. But they were up to the task. They had the physical and mental capabilities necessary to survive in a constantly changing world. They also had the advantage of living in groups, which provided them with the necessary manpower to hunt, gather, and defend themselves. Ultimately, it was this combination of factors that allowed early humans to survive and eventually thrive. They were able to learn from their experiences and adapt their behavior accordingly. They were also able to develop ways to prevent the spread of disease and treat common ailments. As a result, Early humans were able to stay healthy and survive in a world full of challenges. We hope you enjoyed learning about how the first humans survived. If you did, please leave us a like and comment below with your thoughts. We also have tons of other videos about ancient history, archaeology, and paleontology, so check those out too. Thanks for watching.